Welcome to Bloom, a podcast about anything and everything. My name is Nick Fabbri and I'll be your host for today. I'm fortunate to be joined again by my dear friend, Dr. Paul Monk, a writer and poet based here in Melbourne. Today's episode builds on earlier conversations featuring Paul's poetry, including a selection of poems from Red Ochre for the Moon Goddess and Wine on the Flames, two of Paul's latest works. Paul, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Nick. It's great to be back, and I must say that I'm really enjoying reciting poetry. It's wonderful having conversations about world affairs, about autobiography, and other topics. You know, we've covered a lot of ground. But I think I said in an early recording about poetry that the thing about talking on world affairs and other aspects of important social issues is that that's the objective world. That's where you have to be disciplined, you know, and serious in what you say and how you say it. You have to be strictly rational, really, about how you argue. Poetry is different, not because you've got a license to be irrational, but because it's self-expression. It's how you feel about things, what you've experienced, what it means to you. And that's a different category altogether of communication. And you can write it, you can share it privately and in print, but reciting it, enabling other people to listen to how you feel as well as seeing what you say about how you feel, that's a special experience.
And perhaps a remark on the format of these kinds of conversations we've had in the last couple of days. There should be about 3 separate poetry recordings now. And the intention is not necessarily to say something or to have a dialogue or a conversation about the poetry. It's really to, as Paul said before, allow the poetry to speak for itself and allow Paul to show and to recite, you know, the poetry and to demonstrate the feelings that these experiences with these muses have brought up within him over recent years. So I suppose we encourage our listeners to sit back, relax, and let themselves be taken away by the words rather than having to sort of, rather than expecting a two-way dialogue with me involved as well. It's very much a sort of audio book, I'd say, Paul.
Yes, I think that is the idea, and it's a great pleasure, you know, and to, as it were, paraphrase what you were just saying, rather than dissecting and debating the poems, what we're doing is simply giving them a chance to breathe, putting them out there, and then other people can think about them as much as they like. In fact, that's the very idea.
Well, without further ado, Paul, would you like to give us an overview of the amount and type of poems you'll be reciting today and from what works?
Yes, indeed. So Nick mentioned that the poems will be drawn from either of 2 books that I've written in the last 4 years. All of these poems, both of these books, are poems written for Rachael. And we did a recording the other day of 30 poems for Rachael. In offering more, and there will be significantly more in this recording, partly because many of these will be short poems, 12-liners. I just want to underscore the fact that the abundance of poetry, the size of each of these books being in the order of 300 or more poems, is because Rachael has really been an extraordinary muse. What she wanted from me all the way through was poetry. She's very literate. She's very witty. She's polylingual. She speaks beautifully, and this has just been a greatest gift to a poet. And you know, I think it's important to underscore here that if I was a younger man and the overriding objective here was, let's say, sexual desire and the usual impulse to get together with the beloved and live together, sleep together, even have children, then maybe that would have happened and there might not have been any poetry or very little because we have been too busy loving and living. But the reality is that I'm a man of advancing years and I don't seriously believe that those things are possible for us. And I'm not sure that that's what she wants. It's clear that she's immensely intelligent, and in a world where poetry is rather scarce and where other men in her life have had no idea of how to write a poem, she reached out to me seeking intelligent connection and poetry, and it's turned into the most extraordinary poet-muse relationship. beyond anything I've previously experienced. So I see these books as a homage to this remarkable woman, this very unique woman. And that's one of the reasons why I'd like to and will today share more of the poems I've written for her, and as much variety as we can squeeze into an hour or so. All that said, I'd like to begin with a poem that was one of the last to be written. It sits as a kind of epigraph at the beginning of Wine on the Flames. Why begin there rather than, as it were, chronologically earlier? I think because the completion of the two books is a real watershed in the poet-muse relationship in my life. And this poem refers to the final book of the Iliad and to the funeral of Hector, the great Trojan hero, from which the very title of the second book, Wine on the Flames, is taken. And it's a metaphorical rendering of that book in which I appropriate that meaning and the idea of Hector's life and death for myself, as if, in a manner of speaking, I'm Hector, a Hector, if you like, of words rather than swords. And that sets the tone for the rest of the poetry having been written. And in a sense, it's an elegy for the experience I've had. It goes as follows. The games were over now, this book declaims. The gathered armies scattered to their ships, while warriors, relieved of death's dark press, took nourishment and then the grip of sleep. I, conversely, as I start to read the gods' debate about Achilles' rage and what to do with Hector's fallen body, am freshly woken, bathed and exercised. Immersed in Homer, it occurs to me that I have stood before the Scaean gates, confronting death within a world of song, and that Achilles' scorn has been my fate. The body of my work, it might be said, has bounced behind the killer's chariot, both in circles round the walls of Troy and round the tomb of Patroclus. But you, sweet Iris, sent from Mount Olympus to intercede while still my body lasts, that it may be released into the hands of Priam, lord of Ilium itself. You it was who called the grieving king to venture deep into the Argives' camp, at the heel of Hermes, harbinger, and hand of high Olympus, hailing Hector, out of muteness, out of clay and anger, ransomed with the treasures of Pergamum, borne upon hermetic wheels until Cassandra lit upon them from the heights, and cried in tones that rang through all of Troy, "Look down, you men of Troy, you Trojan women! The hero is returned alive from war. Our greatest joy, the king now brings him home." You know, as I now drink my morning coffee, I know, for I am reading Homer's lines, of how the epic ends with Hector's rites, his white bones buried in a golden chest. You, my love, have brought this body back, within the walls of honour, flame, and wine. You've ensured my hallowed grave won't lack the purple of completion, yours and mine. The second poem is called Melding Libraries. It's a kind of sister poem to Sennacherib. In the earlier poem, I put myself into the persona of the Assyrian king Sennacherib and his exultant sense that he has built Nineveh with its hanging garden and its unrivaled palace, and that all of this is a gift to the love of his life, the woman that he has married, Tashmatu Sharat. In Melding Libraries, I elaborate on that theme, as will be seen, by going back actually to when he was courting her. And he sends courtiers to her, offering her gifts and offering her marriage. And she replies in a way that he finds fascinating. She says, "I'm willing to come to Nineveh and be your consort, but on one condition, and that is that you permit me to bring with me my own personal library, which, let me tell you, includes every story written since the flood, many of the stories annotated in my hand, and to meld them with your imperial library as our joint possession." That's the undercurrent in the poem, and you'll see where I take it. What a metaphor you have suggested, the melding of our private libraries, something intimate and existential, something only you would recommend. Where would it begin, our catalogue? How would we, the rulers of the world, create the harmonies in our collection, integrating Babylon with Assur? Oh, you, the mistress of my master heart, having of your own volition sought the lithographic records of the past from ancient Sumer, Akkad, and the East, now tell me that to come to Nineveh, to wed me in the lion courts I've made, you'd have to bring your annotated copies of the tales recounted since the flood. Not least your wryly overwritten slate, your slate of hand, revising Gilgamesh as priestess poet of the primal temple, as avatar of Ishtar, of the moon. What is it now, 3,000 years of writing, since scribes contrived the art of characters, since memory was brilliantly encoded in pictograms in our cuneiform? And you, who'd come to me in beauty, gift of my inheritance of power, prize above all properties this treasure, deep time incised in perdurable stone. You take my breath away, exotic princess. For this, if nothing else, though well I ken your many depths, your cultivated graces, your stature as the paragon of women, that my unrivalled palace shall contain the library of Babel, taken from the fallen Babylon of vanquished pride, was broadcast by the couriers I sent to woo you to the plans for Nineveh. But they reported back that you'd agree to have my hand to come so far for me, if and only if your library could, by our consensual design, be melded with the vast imperial bibliotheca my architects had sketched out for the Lord of all the world. O Queen of Night, O Mistress of the Heavens, who but thou could venture such a bid? Who but thou could confidently claim to hold in her possession matching wealth? For it is not the characters in stone that you propose to mix and match with mine, but rather all your readings of the same, which render them uniquely personal. And these you offer now to blend with mine, presuming in your queenliness of spirit that any slates, whatever classics I give pride of place in my unrivalled palace, will, like yours, be deftly annotated, marked with wit and scored for further time, absorbed into the subtle craft of mind that any lord of all the world ought have. And you, in making this sublime condition, signal to that mind in its presumption that you'd be more than ornament at court, more than mother to our royal heir. You'd be intimate companion, muse, whose conversation, wit, and varied learning among my sphinxes and my scented doors, beneath the foliage and on the waters of the hanging garden, your domain, would more than grace the summit of my power, will do far more than entertain a king, will fructify his inmost sense of self. Oh, Tasmatusarat, you cast to me so rich an offer, more than any king in all the ages of this warring world has fielded in dowries or possession. The melding of our libraries, what a thought! Only one who had this in her gift, while conscious of her consummate appeal, could have conceived, could have advanced it so. But that, in floating such a bold idea, you should state that Gilgamesh himself has been the object of your hermeneutics, encapsulates your loftiness of mind. It hints at how, as Ishtar, you would shape the inner thought, the sensibility of this, your hero, this, the architect of empire reaching down to Lebanon. I shall, in light of this, draw deeper breath than heretofore, and just on your account, I shall advise my draftsmen and their minions in the framing of the inmost chambers to carve upon the lintels of their doors that you are here, my most beloved spouse, that you imbue the shelves within these portals with the meaning books as such can have. That, for your sake, transcending vanities, your faithful king will now become a poet, breathing time and fable, wondering at discourse as our bliss and covenant. The next poem, the third, is called Before Breakfast, and it's a poem with quite a history. It was written off the top of my head on a whim a decade ago, actually, for a friend who, or a lover that I'd met briefly in Cancun on a visit there. But it's been very popular with various people for its wordplay and let it be said, it's eroticism. So here it is by what might be called special request. Before breakfast. You are in the interrogation room, sweet lady, your limbs spread in tremulous bewilderment when I ask, would you care for a little cunnilingus before I bring you breakfast? Other words dance on the tip of my tongue, but how will you receive them lying there? Ah, truth to tell, your labia minora long, do they not? Don't lie, for my longing, for my wondrous palabrations, for such discursive flickers of my subtle tongue, to divulge wantonly the red assent, to disgorge a joyful concordance, such that your unuttered ecstasy will come to seem entirely unambiguous and unfeigned, for all we tested, boxed, and cunning linguists well know that art can overlay apparent pleasures. Will you therefore lie in such a cause, or pause to heed, or better yet receive, not the questioning only, but the lingering parole, the suggestions dancing and darting lingually that I put to you between your parted sighs? For believe me, that this masked interrogation has been invented, given vent, has only been breathed into the imaginary, tabled, laid before my eyes, made the occasion for such fluid ejaculation by the stimuli, the caressed potentialities rumoured forth from your own lips. Not, I grant, quite literally, but arising, budding at your bidding. Breakfast, then. The fourth poem is called Temple Ritual, which is also quite an early poem. And the history, as it were, of this poem bears briefly recounting. It was written based on a growing sense of intimacy quite early with Rachael. Then when the book was coming together, Ingrida Roques, who was doing the drawings for the book, sketched out a drawing of the priestess in the poem leading me, the poet, into the temple. And we showed the sketch to Rachael, and she said, my right hand should be shown reaching back to find your fingers, which was a lovely thought and really quite an iconic one in the context of the whole cycle of poetry. And so Ingrida redid the drawing, and it came out quite beautifully, and this is the poem that goes with that drawing, so to speak. Temple Ritual. There was an ancient ritual, they say, belonging to the cult of Aphrodite, whose practice takes us back to long before ascetic or self-flagellating sects slandered and suppressed the Queen of Hearts. Devotees or adepts of the cult, according to the legends handed down, if they desired to be initiated, had to bring an offering to the temple: pork sausage, figs, and fresh goat's milk. Once within the temple's sacred precinct, the male initiand had to disrobe, then bring his gifts and lay them at the altar. There the long-haired priestess would inspect his proffered goods while hailing Aphrodite. Should his sausage, figs, and milk pass muster, the young initiand would then be guided to a perfumed pool for his ablutions, where nymphs would cleanse him for the temple's use, anoint him, and then lead him back to her. Then he would, or so the legend tells, be taken by the priestess at her pleasure, a woman of extraordinary ilk, with hair of gold, with eyes of emerald green, her skin like silk, her limbs both lithe and lean. But should the adept's offering not find favour, the supplicant was driven from the temple, whipped and scorned by those same striking nymphs. Then, crying Aphrodite in his pain, chastened, he'd reflect and try again. The priestess, on the opening day of spring, would, by custom, of the adepts choose a fine upstanding youth, and leading him within the inner confines of the temple, bring him at last to her own secret room. There, upon soft coverlets of wool, she'd murmur to him Aphrodite's lore, and when he thought he'd learned that lore in full, extend him in the arts of love some more. The ecstasies and mysteries at the core of that eternal cult, its source divine. And even as she did, she would feed the youth on Aphrodite's anchovies and wine, that he would taste, not only hear the truth, imbibing her deep wisdom line by line. The fifth poem is called Morning Walk, and it's really quite a simple poem about as the title itself suggests, taking a morning walk and reflecting on all the beauty and stimulus that Rachael is bringing to my life. This morning stands forever in its beauty, less because the verdure of the trees, the azure sky, the softness of the breeze projected spring upon my strolling mind, than because that mind was filled with you, dazzled by your banter and your wit, the music that you had sent to wake me up, your statement that our coming book of verse must be graced with golden lettering and half Morocco bindings, I insist, or by your offer, if I wrote this poem, to tell me of a secret, how it was King Harold fell at Senlac to the Normans, given you read Latin and have seen the Bayeux tapestry endorsing it, not to mention the astonishment you caused me in suggesting trialogue between myself and you and my good friend, claiming lady gets to choose the topic, goodness, truth, and beauty in St. Thomas. Ah, lady mine, on goodness, truth, and beauty, do we need St. Thomas, his instruction? Our love of music and of libraries, your response to April come she will, when I sent a song at your request, speak for hours, and then there was the rose, capped it in the fullness of its light, which, shared with you, you wrote me, says it all. Oh, then I swear I heard the angels sing, if ever angels do these latter days, the name of Rachael high above the street, yet audible to me, alone, below. Angel, that means messenger, correct? Those messengers communicated meanings of such poignant goodness, truth, and beauty that my psyche heard annunciation. I walked for bread, but soared aloft for love. No matter that you are so far from me, that you exist, that we can feel such things, exalts me as no other love has done. The sixth poem is called Caesar, Antony, Osiris, and it centers on the figure of Cleopatra, but draws on Harold Bloom's writing about it, the late great Chicago-based literary critic. This evening, as I read my Harold Bloom on Cleopatra, your great avatar, or should I say your Ptolemid prolepsis, I was struck by his stark apodixis. Without the fierce sexuality that Cleopatra classically embodies and stimulates in others, there would be no play, tout court. And so it's been with us. Without your wantonness, your fierce longing, I would not have been in play at all. Her electric bed, the critic wrote, that of Isis, as she dubbed herself, had harboured 2 young brothers of the Queen, then great Caesar, then Mark Antony. But, most of all with her famed Roman lovers, she famished those who feasted on her passion. One could not get enough of who she was. And so it's been with me, your would-be Caesar. Rather, let's be clear, than Antony. I want you in my Rome as Aphrodite. Yet, actually for you, I've been Osiris. You found me quite dismembered, out to sea. You gathered up the remnants of my being, kissed them, breathing new life into me. But you've been more than Isis, Cleopatra, witty, brilliant, irresistible. Bloom would cast you as a Janet Sussman, not as plump and flat-voiced Lizzie Taylor. Apex woman, utterly alluring, is who you are. For me, your risen poet. Have I then been Osiris, sister soul, to your desires, replenishing your being? I have clearly not become your Antony, too wary of disaster to commit, too rational, though that could still leave Caesar, if combined with great decisiveness. But let's stay with Osiris, brought to life, your poet, raised by your sweet ministrations, for he transcended Roman generals in what he gave to Isis and to Egypt. Caesar gave us many lasting deeds. Antony, post-Caesar, a fiasco. Osiris, given your deep kiss of life, arose like Dionysus to the task of fructifying Egypt and the East, of journeying while Isis ruled the Nile, until he died at last to then become the seneschal of souls and afterlives. What you've brought forth, my vivid poetry, may make that kind of seneschal of me. We now have a long series of 12-line poems, so they're short, they're sharp, and highly various. The first of them is Red Ochre, so in a sense it's a title poem. It's Red Ochre for the White Goddess, and then the one after it is called The White Goddess, so they're twin poems in a sense, and I'll read them one after the other. Red Ochre. Pale ochres have daubed walls since ancient times. yellow, orange, brown, sienna, umber, but hematite-infused blood-seeming pigment has lent its hint of life to human murals from the Paleolithic down through time as the very colour of the goddess. Neolithic burials, they say, mark out the figure of the Magna Dea, with red ochre summoning rebirth. In Knossos, it still rouged the singular goddess of the maze and double axe, ancestral to Sinopian lip gloss. The White Goddess. I'm not sure what to make of Graves's myth, his massive scholarship, his riddling claims that poetry as such is rooted in the matriarchal cults of long ago, their worship of the fabled triple goddess, in her guises death and birth and beauty. I can't decide, if Apollonian, whether mine is truly verse at all, whether I can claim to be devoted, be it as her consort sacrifice, to the lunar goddess so conceived, but you inspire a form of such belief. One of the many poets whom Rachael has exhibited familiarity with is the Roman poet Catullus, who wrote only one book of verse and died at the age of 30, rather like Shelley, but of consumption, not of a storm at sea. One of the many dazzling things about Rachael is she's fluent in Latin, which I can't claim to be. And so she can banter about Catullus or Ovid or many of the Latin poets. This poem, Catullus 101, is just an attempt to capture the sense that we can live inside the world of Catullus. And one of the signature poems of Catullus, not an erotic poem, not a love poem, is one where he's lamenting the fact that he learned that his brother was dying when he was abroad, and he raced back to get there before his brother died, but he was unable to get there in time, and so he arrived back and all there were ashes. And so the poem is a kind of existential reflection on that, as it says, and its possible relevance to the relationship between a muse, who is far away, and her poet at the ends of the earth. Catullus 101. Do you think it's faintly possible that the music of a journey long ago across the seas, traversing many countries, in Latin verse that ends with atque vale, could come to sing but also haunt our longings? That, seeking me across those centuries, having learned too late of my demise, you might arrive for my poor obsequies? Alight with love for this your brother poet, to find no more than mutam cinerem. Then offer me a vigil in your grief, and weep at last for all that might have been. The 10th poem is titled Reading Epipsychidion, which is one of Shelley's more famous love poems, and it's a critical reflection on that poem and whether it still resonates in our time, or whether it jars slightly, coming from the high romantic period. It's strange, you know, that though we venerate the poetry of Byron, Keats and Shelley, we generally recoil from their excesses, their thys and thous and soaring rhetoric, such as Percy Shelley's flight of fire, I pant, I sink, I tremble, I expire. Yet when I hear your panting, living voice murmur words of moist and ardent passion, when I read the words you write to me or listen to the songs you cast my way, I live then Shelley's high romantic line, I am not thine, I am a part of thee. Poems 11 and 12 both have to do with the great German poet and polymath Goethe, Johann Goethe, who, among other things, wrote love poetry, wrote erotic verse. The first of them is titled Goethe and You, centric on Goethe's Roman elegies, which are erotic poems. The second of these poems, the 12th in the recital, is titled From Ovid to Goethe, and by this stage Rachael was calling me her Ovid. And so I was linking these two references. So the first is Goethe and You. I wasn't raised to read erotic verse, and never heard of Goethe while at school. Sex was quite verboten, and what's worse, my parents hoped I'd be a holy fool. If only I had read his Roman elegies when bursting with the juice of life in youth, Propertius too, and Ovid, all of these, I'd then have had a different gospel truth. Instead, conflicted, I lived with unease, guilt-racked and uncertain what to do, hedging against sin and foul disease, until I learned my Goethe and found you. From Ovid to Goethe. Naive erotic verse is classical. It's what the free-willed Greeks and Romans wrote, though even then sweet Eros clashed with order, as Ovid found for writing Art of Love. He was a kind of ancient Alfred Kinsey, exploring how the Romans took their pleasures, though he did so in poetry, not prose, enchanting and enlightening at once. But all such verse is best when breathed together, as you and I both know and long to do. And Goethe's finest work brought antic Ovid into modern life for me and you. Poems 13 and 14 are Bath and Trav, followed by Ovid again, Ovid on SMS. And Bath and Trav draws upon Verdi's great opera, La Traviata, which is set in Paris, and Rachael was in Paris. And the opera is a story where there's a courtesan, Violetta, in Paris, and one of her clients, Baron Dufault, is wealthy and short-tempered, and he wants to monopolize her. He wants her for his mistress, not just for the occasional frolic. But the other character, Alfredo, is a poet, and he falls really in love with Violetta, and she with him. And the question is then, well, what will she do? And so this poem, Bath and Trav, is about how Rachael and I discovered that, well, actually we were in almost exactly that situation, and by the merest coincidence, the other man in her life, my rival for her love, was actually called Dufault. Bath and Trav. You called me, Violetta, as I bathed, inspiring a rendition of Brindisi, my sighing song of longing and of passion. Now I cannot bathe without the thought that you are off in Paris with Dufault, a jealous man of wealth and violent temper. Ah, mia Traviata, do not stray. Don't say that our love has come too late. État dit is not what I want to hear. Tell the Baron that you love Alfredo, that I'm your poet. He can be your friend. That's where the opera's meant to end. Ovid on SMS. Just suppose your Ovid had a phone, and consequently didn't have to pine or send his Tristia to Rome by boat. He could call or text you all the time, and more important, you could send him love in sexy voicemails, naughty messages. That'd cut the distance down a lot, and frankly stir the exiled poet's pot. What say you, Muse? A good idea or not? I'm teasing you, of course. We've both got phones, and your bewitching voice, seductive notes, are the air in which your poet floats. Poem 15 is titled D.H. Lawrence, who, of course, became famous in the mid-20th century for writing books about sexual love and about women and sexuality, which scandalized the conservative culture. And Lady Chatterley's Lover became a famous court case, should it be censored or banned. And it was a landmark case because the court ruled that it couldn't be banned or censored, that it was literature. It goes as follows. You've read so well, you must have read your Lawrence, David Herbert, not the Seven Pillars, and knowing you as Rainbow Gypsy Lady, I imagine you've an eye for what's obscene, what got his novels banned or expurgated until the famous trial in 1960. But here's what strikes me most at this remove. Far more than Lawrence, you have stirred my senses, rousing me from cold Platonic torpor, encouraging the fire and passion of sex. You make me feel I'm Lady Chatterley, and you, her potent lover in the garden. Poem 16 is titled Genital Hypertrophy, and it's a wry poem, but it centers on the fact that the artist of the early 20th century, late 19th century, Toulouse-Lautrec, was a dwarf, really. I mean, he was under 5 feet tall, but he had the reputation, at least, of having a normal-sized penis and a small body, and he was known as Tripod for that reason. And so this poem plays on this rather intriguing idea. Gentle hypertrophy. Perhaps your thing's too large, you gently quipped, referring to a stalling SMS, then giggled by emoji straight away. Would you giggle if in fact I had the genitalia of Toulouse-Lautrec, whose nickname, Tripod, frankly says it all? He was actually shorter far than me, 8 inches so, I swear I tell the truth, but not, I must confess, just genitally. Heavens, that'd cause a girl to gasp, to think me so much larger than the cunt. Don't panic, though. I'm well within your grasp. Poem 17 is called Cosmological Optics, and among Rachael's many delightful features is she's got a very wide erudition. She's sometimes, however, given to strong opinions with which I don't agree, and in this instance, we're talking about cosmology, the nature of the cosmos. And so the poem is called Cosmological Optics. It goes as follows. How do you view the cosmos, may I ask? Or what on earth inspired your startling words? Shut your mouth, you don't know anything, when I spoke of atoms and the void. We really need to have a conversation about first things concerning thought and matter, not least the void, which seems to lie beneath the easy grace and wit of your demeanour. Don't you know that I stand with Lucretius, or better still, with Einstein, Planck, and Hubble? The optics, looking outward, are quite clear, but look within, for there you are in trouble. Poem 18 is Rommel of the Heart, as in the German general in the Second World War, who was, or is, famous for his campaigns in North Africa. Rommel of the Heart. Erwin Rommel was quite undeterred by cautionary principles of strategy. His boldness at the front was legendary. With his eye on Alexandria, despite his patent lack of potent forces, he threw himself at Cyrenaica. I'm a bit like that, it must be said. I'm prone to seize the moment, dash ahead, hurling promises across the desert, when I know the distant, glittering prize lies just beyond a poet's Alamein. Defeated once this year, I'm back again. Poem 19, Tall Priestess. It has to be said, you loom like Jerry Hall over the little rock star you seem to take me for. What's not to like? You've all her attributes, legs that go on forever, sexiness to up and die for. Me, well, that's another matter. But if we took it quietly, poems, not smash hits, it just might work. Poem 20, Fucking to Wagner. There was a boast Rach made in a candid moment quite early on that she enjoys Verdi operas, but she enjoys fucking to Wagner, and I thought at the time, whoa, that's a forward statement to make, and so I responded, I take it by that you mean slowly, lyrically, and for hours at a time. So here's the poem, Fucking to Wagner. Your subtleties and glamour drew me first. Your elegance and glowing blue-green eyes, the hints that you were highly educated and travelled to exotic destinations. But then you sprang upon me, Straussian woman, a wholly unexpected declaration that you, the golden girl with emerald eyes, were sexually a Wagner kind of chick. You upped and said with stunning candour, fucking to the sound of Wagner operas. So there, and we were hardly yet acquainted. Now I know you meant just what you said. Poem 21 is titled K. Summersby. It's pretty self-explanatory, so I won't give a homily beforehand. K. Summersby. Would you prefer that our discreet affair remain a matter only between us, assuming we ourselves are not forgotten, as others quickly are once they're interred? Would or would you not want to be known as the muse of my erotic verse? There's precedent aplenty for concealment. Here's one I just lately chanced upon. K. Summersby and Dwight D. Eisenhower, lovers, it would seem, in World War II, left so little trace of what they did that even now historians disagree. Poem 21, Dante and Petrarch. For those otherwise unfamiliar with them, both were great medieval Italian poets. Dante was inspired by a beautiful young woman called Beatrice, and Petrarch by a woman called Laure de Sade, for whom he wrote 300 sonnets in a form known ever since as the Petrarchan sonnet. Dante and Petrarch. If Dante had received from Beatrice, or Petrarch from the Laura of his sonnets, the SMSs you have sent to me, how would those great humanists have acted? How inflected their great poetry? Boccaccio, I'd say, might offer clues. Imagine Dante's Divine Comedy with Beatrice anything but chaste, winking at the poet and enticing him to Aphrodite's paradise, while Petrarch's endless vows of sublimation became a whirling dance of ecstasies. Poem 23 is called Amor Recumbens, and it's a reflection on an incident when I was travelling on business. I woke up the first morning in Canberra, and the dawn light was coming through the window and shining on the big hotel bed in which I'd slept, which was all rumpled, and I took a photo of the bed with the light falling on it and sent it to Rachael, and she came back straight away with the words, Amor recumbens aurorae, love reclines at dawn. And the sheer act of doing that so quickly, so spontaneously, is one of many instances where I just thought, this woman's enchanting, to respond like that and so quickly. So I wrote a poem called Amor Recumbens. The day draws down, and though I've been at leisure, nostalgia of the lips gnaws at my heart. They long for you, for soft dawn light, the pleasure of kissing you in every tender part. I've had 3 days of searching conversation over seafood, coffee, and good wine, but all the while the visceral inspiration has been the yearning dream, would she were mine. Love reclines in morning light, you wrote, in perfect Latin, emailed with a kiss. I've meditated since on that sweet note, imagined our shared auroral bliss. And poem 24 is Garden of Pomegranates. Here, within the garden of our love, against an old stone wall, there stands a tree, an apple of Granada, multi-trunked, inviting contemplation of its form. The sunlight of an afternoon of fables glows against its leaves and purple fruit, that fruit which grows in countless ancient myths, rooted in the cycles of the seasons. In ancient Greece, they say, it symbolized the blood of young Adonis, mourned by Venus, as Thamas was a vegetation god, brought back to life midsummer by her grace. Poem 25, Splitting the Fruit. We both of us, in truth, now face the wall, where sunlight falls on richly laden boughs, empurpled fruit, the object of our gaze, entwining trunks, the semblance of our hopes. Shall we, therefore, cut a calyxed bud, and thereby hold our future in our hands, then slice the luscious thing to juice and seed, an emblem of a pact about our lives, as fertile as the Punica granatum, the pomme grenade so widely celebrated, especially when split, as I propose, a rite of spring, a vision of pure passion. Poem 26, Kabbalah. Have you ever studied Kabbalah, the medieval literature of signs, of occult meaning overlaid on meaning, reaching for creation and the fall? According to that textual tradition, the garden from which Adam was expelled, with Eve for tasting the forbidden fruit, was a garden full of pomegranates. The fruit itself upon the tree of knowledge, a pomegranate filled with seeds of fate. The tree you've pointed to is such a tree. Our Kabbalah is all my poetry. Poem 26 is Pandora Papers. Some listeners will recall that the Panama Papers and the Pandora Papers were massive leakages or hacking of secret documents from the offshore tax haven world. And that bears on the present story and enters into the cycle of poems insofar as Duval, the man in Europe whose mistress Rachael was while this poetry is being written, worked in that domain, which is not to say that he himself was criminal in any way, but that's the area. And so when the Pandora Papers came out, I was fascinated by the revelations. The poem goes as follows. Is this then the world that you inhabit, having claimed we're here to kindle hope, to bring alive the heartbeat of the nations, a quest in which we're spiritually aligned? His world is secret offshore bank accounts, in which 36 well-known global leaders, 100 billionaires and ranked tycoons, celebrities and such have stashed their lucre. Ah, sweetheart, let's salute the journalists, the ICIJ heroes and their sources, who brought to light this hopeless, heartless scandal, and kiss each other in our secret places. Poem 27 is You and the Parisian Chicks. This is the context for this, just to give it added meaning, was Rachael indicated that she was thinking of getting her long, beautiful blonde hair cut short and to just have a bob, which she thought would be more fashionable in contemporary Paris. But what did I think, she asked. And she said that both her hairdresser, a French male, and Dufault had flatly said, no, you mustn't cut your hair. And I felt the same way. And so I wrote this poem, You and the Parisian Chicks. I might have written fully 30 lines in pleading for you not to cut your hair, but time was short, so I cut to the chase. You're thinking of a futuristic bob, but also say that the Parisian chicks are envious and feel intimidated by your countess hair and regal bearing. That's fine for them, but darling, think of us. We worship all that flowing, queenly gold. Let the chicks with green eye think you haughty. Let them fear the coming of the Hun, as their grandmares did in 1940. I was about to announce poem 27, and I thought, but it could be 28. We've been improvising a little as we go, and so forgive us if we've lost count. So let's call this poem 28 and cross our fingers. This one's called Latin Vocab Test because I think I remarked earlier, Rachael, apart from speaking English, French and German, reads Latin fluently and will mock me at times about my deficient Latin, and at one point said that she would subject me to a Latin vocab test just to see where I was up to. So I wrote the following poem, which is a rather risque Latin vocab test. I have always been impressed that you read Latin. It's one of many skills you plainly have, and more than skills, an easy savoir-faire concerning men and all things of account. So when you said you'd test my Latin vocab in the context of my going down below Mount Pubis, there to sheath my tongue, my brain lit up to think what I'll be shown. I'm certain you will ask about the labia, ensuring that I know whereof I seek, and that you will insist that clitoris means Venus when translated from the Greek. Poem 29 is Oh, to be your stallion. Among her many skills and attributes, Rachael is an equestrienne. And if sometimes in these poems, some more than others, I come across as the more passive party, it's not an accident. I am. And so in response to her talk about riding horses and being the only girl that could ride a certain stallion, for example, I wrote the following poem, which has me aspiring to be her stallion. Oh, to be your stallion. Oh, to be your stallion in the wild, a masculine and richly penised beast, proud to bear your weight and purposes. You talk to me of racing with the wind, of being with you, creaturely and bold, of fording rushing rivers in the cold. We'd make a centaur, unlike any other, since ever first the Indo-Europeans rode their step-bred steeds among the farmers. The beauty of your rich and braided locks, the flashing of your brilliant emerald eyes, would make old Europe gaze on us in awe. Poem 30 is Losing Your Virginity, and it's a humorous one, because, to my surprise, she asked at one point, do you want to know how I lost my virginity? And of course I said, that sounds very interesting, and then she didn't do it. And so I wrote the following poem, Losing Your Virginity. I really can't believe you lost it, woman, this thing that's loosely called virginity. Where can you have possibly mislaid it? Could it be you put it in a box? Or left it on a shelf between two books? Perhaps you folded it and slipped it into your copy of old Kinsey's fat report, or dropped it by mistake out in the garden among the Mr. Lincolns as you pruned them, or possibly you cast it in the trash. In any case, now, even if you found it, it wouldn't be the slightest bit of use. Poem 31, Porcino. there's a story behind this which is worth sharing because I think it's a very delightful story. Rachael in character will often ask me to look for something beautiful or write her a poem about some exotic idea, whether it's pomegranates or some other theme from the classical world. And on this particular occasion, she urged me to go out for a good walk in the sunshine, find something beautiful, and send her a photograph. So I went out for a walk, and I came across a beautiful white-limbed gum tree, and I thought, that'll do, that looks beautiful. So I took a photo of it and sent it to her, and I was about to walk on when I noticed that there was a great big mass of mushrooms at the foot of the gum tree. Without any particular idea in mind, much less what would eventuate, I just sent her that photo as well. I said, oh, look at this at the foot of the tree. To which she responded, now you've got me lusting for porcini, meaning pink mushrooms. Well, you can imagine what immediately sprang to mind, and clearly that was her intent. And she then texted me, write me a poem. Well, what was I to do? So I concluded my walk, went home, and I wrote this poem, Porcino, as a singular mushroom, as it were. Mushrooms grow in quite unlikely places, or at least the kind you like, those pink porcini, and when they're taken, they leave subtle traces, the seeds of scenes from movies by Fellini. My pink porcino is growing just for you. Its vibrant stem is rearing from the grass. Its rosy head is edible, it's true, and so's the rest. Enjoy it with a glass of finest dry and chilled Italian vino, at ease upon your country house chaise longue. Enjoy the savour of this prize porcino, its flavour in your mouth both rich and strong. Poem 32, Fortuna Imperatrix Mundi, which means fortune, or good fortune, or luck, Empress of the world. At dawn and dusk you loom on my horizon, growing, as you've done for several others, Venus, Genetrix, and Hesperus. Imperatrix, I came within your orbit long before your poet recognized that equally you are Fortuna Mundi, the Lady Luck or Chance who rules our lives, the Empress of a world of randomness, looked upon in hope by Homo Ludens. Your beauty and sidereal attentions command the lives of poets as of beasts, the latter dumb, the former fireflies. Poem 33, Dream Godiva. You volunteered that you are my Godiva, but does that make me Massier's Leofric, or do I have the fate of Peeping Tom? Either way, I'd watch you ride through Coventry. Your glorious hair, so long, so glossy, falling loose about your shoulders and your breasts, is for me the very stuff of legend, the gift of God, as eyes on you agree. Ego Godiva comitissa Dieu, she wrote, it said, though churlish pedants quibble. Istud desideravi. Is that so? Have you inscribed those words upon my heart? Poem 34 is The Siege of Tyre. For those who know Arrian's history of Alexander's campaign, the Siege of Tyre will be familiar, but that's a very small minority of people. So when Alexander the Great was conquering the Persian Empire, one of the cities that resisted him in what's now Lebanon was the Phoenician city of Tyre, and he had to besiege it and take considerable exertions to capture the city, which he eventually did by ingenious exertions and improvisations. So I've used that as a metaphor for the long courtship between Rachael and myself, and who was besieging whom here. The Siege of Tyre. Famously, the rampant Alexander, defied by Tyre with its fleet and walls, built a mole extending from the mainland out against the Tyrian defences. The siege of Tyre, in that and other ways, was long and costly, but at length it fell, before the Macedonians' assault, was ravished and subjected to his rule. Now, which of us is Tyre, which Alexander? I'd like to think my poetry's the mole, but it could be this poet's Arrian, his heart the city, you its conqueror. We go from the ancient history of Alexander the Great to Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland with a poem called Cheshire Cat, the 35th poem. I'd swear at times that you're the Cheshire Cat, Has that occurred to you in your retreat? Smiling from your branch, advising me that that way lies the hatter, that the hare, and both are mad, as clearly I must be, or I would not have come to where you are. You vanish like the cat, then reappear, keeping your foe Alice quite off balance. At times you vanish slowly, tail to snout, until there's just your smile, my pussy muse, confounding judgment, leaving me in doubt which way to go and even how to choose. The next poem, which by my count is 36, is Oysters and Us. It's another 12-line poem, but it's from Wine on the Flames, whereas all the others have been from Red Ochre for the Moon Goddess. And it goes as follows. You say the world's our oyster, and that we will gulp it down in coupled ecstasy, in all the ways ecstatic couples can. I'll drink to that, my passionate companion, and to all the wide world has to offer. Yet my pairing with you is our world, and it has been for us less all-consuming than the making of a priceless pearl within the shell that harbours who we are. A foreign substance slipped beneath our mantle, which caused our oyster, in its own defence, to build from nacreous poetry our love. Poem 36, Parted Petals, again from Wine on the Flames. One alone of 13 choice pink lilies has opened since I placed them in a vase. Only one, and this one only when, or rather let me say only because, you invited me to part your petals, a naughty thought before the sacred nones, so you called this sensual invitation. But that pink lily was suitably pious. It delayed its opening up to me until after your 3 p.m. devotions. Now it's Vespers, and we have the dark in which to contemplate the open flower, the gorgeous petals of your pinkest part, the secret longings of your floral heart, the perfumed passion of your poet's art. Poem 36, The Perfume of Our Lilies. This week, when I enter my apartment, the overflowing odour of our lilies flows from the old factory of my love, who has requested my procuring of them, as symbolic and as redolent of the dreams you nourish and my passion. They have opened as the week elapsed, a week of convalescence for your Proust, your fond aesthete, your much secluded poet, brooding on the wars of humankind, lamenting your inevitable absence, yet elevated by your words of praise. They're overripe and dying slowly now, these emblems of our fine imagined garden. But it should not be thought that their demise will signify decay in our romance. Au contraire, their perfumes now preserved in your impassioned sighs and in my verse. Poem 37, Petrus 93. The poem's fairly self-explanatory, but the basic situation is that Rachael told me of a wine tasting she'd gone to in which she'd been offered a taste of a very expensive wine called Petrus 93, and it had been bold enough to swallow the whole glass, because it's a remarkable wine. Petrus wines in general are very expensive, and they're only made at one vineyard in France, in the Bordeaux region. So the poem reflects on what this all means. Petrus 93. It would have had to be from Aquitaine, that glass of Petrus 93 you swallowed, slightly dry and rustic in complexion, classical from fabled ancient ground, a single vineyard covering 12 hectares, where wine goes back as far as Roman times, at Pomerol, just eastward of Bordeaux, exports such wine for thousands by the bottle. You picked it out among 6 chosen wines, and of them all you savoured it the most. So far, in fact, you drained the glass of song, perhaps $1,000 worth of red. How beastly of the maestro to chastise your pleasure in the prized exquisite draught, and relegate you, sweet sommelier, to second place. He should have toasted you. Oh, let me be your Petrus 93, the glass you drain with pure, unfeigned delight, in all my cherried vintage poetry, distilled from dreams of you by day and night. So we'll conclude with 2 longer poems, the first of which is Ochre, whom I worship. And the name, the word Ochre, is the old Anglo-Saxon name for Easter. In fact, it's where the word Easter comes from in more modern English. Ochre, whom I worship. It's Eastertide, Ochre, whom I worship, an ancient festival the Christians stole, which rightly is the vernal equinox, as Teutons reckoned it before conversion, honouring the full ascendant moon. You, Ochre, mock me as a pagan, wilfully ignoring all I've learned of your reduction from your primal glory by those who both exploit and deprecate your inner beauty, which I know so well. So if you now look back at your long life, before corrupting priests usurped your being, before the fall of Adam in the garden, before the shadow fell upon your moon, where might you now find inflection points? I am, you understand, your liberator, qua poet, the remaker of old myths. I'm dancing now before Ostara's altar. Who would alter what they've made of you? I'm seeing you, Ochre. I'll renew your self-belief, the freshness of your eggs. I'll paint them with red ochre for the blood that, being life, you menstrually shed. I'll roll them upwards on the hill of time and play your paramour upon its crown. But you, against this equinoctial promise, declare that you are merely Dufal's girl, a trivial, subordinated woman, professing she's no goddess but a prisoner of that beast's hypocrisy and dogma. Our second-last poem, the last of a few longer ones at the end here, is Aeschylus and Us. Aeschylus, as most of you I trust will know, if you're educated enough to find the poetry we've been sharing interesting, was of course the first of the great Greek tragedians of the 5th century. And his poems helped to frame what Athens was actually all about, not least in terms of the rule of law instead of vendetta. And I apply that to the question of our relationship and how would we regularize that? How would we make it something of commitment rather than flirtation, shall we say? Aeschylus and Us. I have the incense burning on my table as I sit down to write these lines to you, an emblem of religious sacrifice, of homage to the longed-for morning star, whom you became for me these 15 months. But evening comes, O Hesperus, my love, and other thoughts than passion supervene, as your poet, cast aside at noon, now contemplates the lessons for the soul incumbent on us all in time and space. The Oresteia, made by Aeschylus, performed throughout one Dionysian day before the seated citizens of Athens, encompassing the cosmos in its sweep, leaps now to my mind as meant for us. The beacons at the start of Agamemnon signal to the brooding Clytemnestra that he who'd sacrificed their Iphigenia would soon be unsuspecting in her hands. Smouldering revenge is hers for Aulus. Other fires close the trilogy, the torch-lit quasi-marital procession in which the poet has the vengeful Furies reconciled to democratic justice and dubbed the kindly ones on that account. Could this not be our drama, my Electra? Could I not be Orestes in your tale, companion in the fateful resolution of anger issues that have dogged our lives? Oh, come with me to Athens and the theatre. As a coda to all of those poems, we conclude with a sonnet, which actually is embedded in the foreword to Wine on the Flames, as I remarked. It takes its point of departure from Shakespeare's Sonnet 38, How Can My Muse Want Subject to Invent? And is a reflection on what does all of this poetry and my love for Rachael and her feelings for me add up to in the larger scheme of things, that is, in terms of our mortality and our lives. Take, for instance, Sonnet 38, How can my muse want subject to invent? I feel as much, but fear that soon or late you'll turn from me, your interest quite spent. I'm certain I've written more for thee than Stratford penned for his forgotten muse, and your delight in this gives joy to me, yet having so much bliss I've more to lose. Suppose in winter cold my many blooms should go to seed, your pleasure in them wane. Suppose thine own sweet argument succumbs, what of our romance would then remain? Some 700 roses dried and pressed, heaped around your place of final rest.